माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन जमुना तीरावनचारी जमुना तीरावनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतश्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस सभे चरण अरविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय नित्यलील प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतश्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस शील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय वांछा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कम करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघायते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणम्। So Hare Krishna, thank you all for joining for the Srimad Bhagavatam class. We will be reading from 3rd canto, 6th chapter, text 33. So I will just recite the shloka once, and then I have requested Yashodanandan Prabhu to read the translation and the purport, and then we'll continue from there. So you can follow along if you have a book or a phone or a laptop. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.6.33. So the Virat Rupa's description continues. Padbhyam Bhagavato Yagne Shushusha Dharma Siddhe Rashyam Jata Pura Shudro yadvrittaya tushyate harihi.
Thereafter, service was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of perfecting the religious function. Situated on the legs are the Shudras, who satisfy the Lord by service. Purport. Service is the real constitutional occupation of all living entities. The living entities are meant to render service to the Lord, and they can attain religious perfection by this service attitude. One cannot attain religious perfection simply by speculating to attain theoretical knowledge. The Jnani division of spiritualists go on speculating only to distinguish the soul from matter, but they have no information of the activities of the Lord after being liberated by knowledge. It is said that persons who only mentally speculate to know things as they are, and who do not engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, are simply wasting their time. It is clearly said here that the principle of service was generated from the legs of the Lord for the sake of perfecting the religious process. But this transcendental service is different from the idea of service in the material world. In the material world, no one wants to be a servant. Everyone wants to become the master, because false mastership is the basic disease of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul in the material world wants to lord it over others. Illusioned by the external energy of the Lord, he is forced to become a servant of the material world. That is the real position of the conditioned soul. The last snare of the illusory external energy is the conception of becoming one with the Lord. And due to this conception, the illusioned soul remains in the bondage of material energy, falsely thinking himself a liberated soul and as good as Narayan. It is actually better to be a Shudra than to be a Brahmana and not develop the service attitude, because that attitude alone satisfies the Lord. Every living being, even if he be a Brahmana by qualification, must take to the transcendental service of the Lord. Both Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam support that this service attitude is the perfection of the living entity. A Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra can perfect his occupational duties only by rendering service unto the Lord. A Brahmana is supposed to know this fact due to his perfection in Vedic wisdom. The other sections are supposed to follow the direction of the Brahmana, Vaishnava, one who is a Brahmana by qualification and a Vaishnava by action. That will make the entire society perfect in regard to the order of its social construction. A disordered society cannot satisfy either the members of the society or the Lord. Even if one is not a perfect Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, but takes to the service of the Lord, not caring for the perfection of his social position, he becomes a perfect human, being simply by developing the attitude of service to the Supreme Lord.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you, Yashodanandan Prabhu, for reading that wonderfully. Okay. So we are in this third canto, sixth chapter. Just a quick backdrop. So this is a discussion between Vidura and Maitreya. Maitreya Muni is speaking, Vidura is asking. And the topic here at hand is the Virat Rupa, the universal form of the Lord. It's a kind of a complicated topic, but it's an important topic. It gets a whole chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. Amongst 18 chapters, one chapter is dedicated to this universal form. And then in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, the first canto, there is description of the Virat Rupa, then second canto, first chapter. So like that. So this is an important subject. And amongst the 10 subject matters of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is Sarga and Visarga. Sarga is the primary creation that the Supreme Lord does. And Visarga is the secondary creation that Lord Brahma does. So this specific section, anyway, so why firstly, before we get into even the creation, what and how, but why all this? So the scriptures explain that the purpose of this creation is the Lord's compassion. As we understand, the living entities they exist co-eternally with the Lord. And some of the living entities, because of their free will, they rebel against the Lord and they want to enjoy independently of the Lord. So the Lord, in a way, he knows this, just like how Srila Prabhupada mentions, when the state government, when it is, creating different buildings, it also creates a prison house. Not that it wants its citizens to be in the prison house, but it creates a prison house because it knows that some of the living entities will rebel. And so there is a correctional facility for that, for them. So similarly, the Supreme Lord, he sort of knows that the living entities that will turn away from him, they will try to find happiness separate from him. And unfortunately, they will get kicked around, they will suffer. And so out of compassion, the Lord, creates this material world as a correctional facility. So firstly, why this complicated, subject matter? If we understand the why, then we have a better chance of understanding what and how. So it comes from the compassion of the Lord. That's the first point. And then also Srila Prabhupada mentions that whenever we hear such topics which are inconceivable, which are hard to understand, what are we supposed to do? In one sense, it is supposed to invoke in us, insignificance, and also at the same time how great God is. Srila Prabhupada says that many people say God is great, but they don't really know how great God is. So when we hear such, fantastic topics, we get a glimpse of how great God is and how insignificant we are. And so then the insignificant serves the great. So that's the whole purpose of, especially these topics which are difficult for us to understand. If we can just understand this, take this one part, that how great God is, and that, I should serve him, then it's sufficient. If we can understand more, that's better. Anyway, so it is not our going back home, back to Godhead is not dependent upon, understanding the intricacies of all these complex topics. If that was the criteria, many of us would not make it. But anyway, so that's the whole point of this Sambandha Gyan in one sense. And then that Sambandha Gyan is supposed to invoke Abhideya. Now that I know the root of existence, then I water the root. So I worship the Lord. That's the whole idea. That's one. So that's the purpose. The Lord's compassion for the rebellious living entities. He's creating this whole material world for them if they want to, if they so desire to just turn away from him and stay there eternally, they could do so. But if they want to come back to him, then they can also come back to him. So it's a correctional facility. And the Lord sends his scriptures, his Vaishnavas, the bhakti process for those that are interested to come back. Similarly, and this is again just a backdrop. One more thing is, one of the expansions, one of the eternal expansions of the Lord, Rama Devi, she also requires some service. So her reflection, it is mentioned actually in this beginning of this chapter, 6th chapter. The word Chaya Devi is not used, but so she needs some service, the reflection of Rama Devi, Chaya Devi. So she needs some service to do. And she has the service of Durga, the in charge of the prison house. So this is also created so that she has some service to do. So compassion for the living entities, compassion for Chaya Devi, etc. So that's the why. And then, of course, the what and the how you have already heard. Maharaj was also recently in Nepal, and he was explaining all these things. And so currently, so coming to the verse at hand now, So the verse that is at hand is 3.6.33, and the most immediate section, Vedara is describing about the Varnashram system, how the Varnashram system, like Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Chatur Varne Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that the Varnashram system comes from him. And so here he is clearly describing that, how from different parts of the universal form, from his Virat Rupa, from the head comes the Brahmana caste, from the arms come the Kshatriyas, from the thighs come the Vaishyas, and from the legs come the Shudras. So that is the topic here, and a beautiful purport we read. Yeah. So here, Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by discussing that the eternal constitutional position of the living entity is to be a servant. Jivera Swarupa Hoya, Krishnera Nityadas. And this human form of life is meant to actually re-establish or regain that spirit of service. Yeah. And broadly, so again, time is limited. Broadly, there are two main things that Srila Prabhupada is talking about. He's talking about the Bhagavad Dharma. Because in the end also he mentions, yes, the Varnashram system is there. And the goal of the Varnashram system is also to be centered around Krishna, to serve Krishna in those Varnas and ashramas. Or another way of saying the same thing is the Varnashram system without Krishna at the center has no meaning in a way. It loses its meaning. And Prabhupada is mentioning that the Bhagavad Dharma can be, cultivated by everyone. And the Bhagavad Dharma directly, it, establishes or re-establishes the service position of the Lord. Yeah. And specifically here, the Shudras are being glorified, especially for their service attitude. In the Varnashram system, the Shudras, they are the servants of all the other, Varnas. Yeah. So the service mood of the Shudras is being glorified, and Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that the service mood is what is to be cultivated in the human form of life. And there are mainly, one can say, two main ways: the Bhagavat Marga and the Varnashram Dharma, Bhagavat Dharma and the Varnashram Dharma. But as Srila Prabhupada has taught us, the Varnashram Dharma is subservient, it stands upon Bhagavat Dharma. In fact, the Kali Yuga begins with the fall of the Brahmanas, so the Varnashram system actually collapses. So to re-establish the Varnashram system, even one requires the Bhagavad Dharma. And the Bhagavad Dharma, again, anyone can take up the Bhagavad Dharma. And Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that, it is better to try to perfect one's, Bhagavad Dharma practices than worry about so much, the social position, the Varnashram system. We're not minimizing it, the Varnashram system, because Varnashram system is being talked about here. But Srila Prabhupada is again and again mentioning that Bhagavad Dharma, bhakti process, Jivera Swarupa Hoya, Krishnera Nityatas, that can be awakened simply by the process of bhakti. Yeah. And then Prabhupada also mentions that there is a difference between theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. So the goal of knowledge, the goal of Sankhya, the goal of knowledge is to come to the position of Sharanagati. One says, Bahunam Janmanamante Kyanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudevam Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. Or on the other hand, like in the purport it is mentioned, it is not sufficient to understand that I'm a spirit soul. Then, okay, what does the spirit soul do? The spirit soul has a relationship with the Lord, and the part serves the whole. So Prabhupada is talking about the Gyanis, the empiricists, who are theoretically trying to understand these things. And then the last layer of Maya is they even think that there's no difference between them. Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit soul, but I'm as good as Narayana. So their efforts at knowledge, they are baffled. The last layer of Maya, they think that they're as good as Narayan. And this knowledge, again, this knowledge is gained in a descending manner. In a descending manner. The process of knowledge is included in the process of bhakti. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashogya Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahitukam. So, we're all living examples. I can speak for myself. I'm not a great scholar or anything. But just by beginning to follow the process of bhakti and hearing from great personalities, Vaishnavas, that's how this knowledge is awakened. We don't have to be bookworms and all that. Of course, we should read Srila Prabhupada books, but we are not meant to be bookworms. We are meant to render service to the Lord, re-establish our service through the process of bhakti. And within the process of bhakti, the knowledge is already there. So even when we approach these scriptures, it is a devotional endeavor. It's Bhakti Shastri. It's not Jnana Shastri, it's Bhakti Shastri. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share. And Prabhupada also mentions here that it is better to be a Shudra and cultivate that service mood rather than be a so-called Brahmana and not be a servant of the Lord, right? There are some verses. Shat karma nipuno vipra mantra tantra visharadaha avaishnavo gurur nasyad vaishnavo swapacho guru kiba vipra kiba nyashi shudra kene nai ye Krishna tattva veta shei guru hoy. So we just don't want to be, this Brahmana who is averse to the service of the Lord. It is better to be a Shudra who is interested in the service of the Lord than be a Brahmana who is averse to the service of the Lord. So again, Bhagavad Dharma is being glorified. And if one chants the holy name and if one cultivates the Bhagavad Dharma, then all perfection, as Prabhupada writes at the end of the purport, all perfection can come to the human being. There are many verses in Bhagavatam. Again, Varnashram Dharma that is executed perfectly, but if it doesn't evoke Rati unto the Lord, it's Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. And on the other hand, a little bit, Swalpam Apiyasya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bhayat, Narada Muni says, even a little endeavor on this Bhagavad Dharma, if the living entity does that, and he misses a few things in the Varnashram department, especially in Kali Yuga, it's okay. It's okay. We are limited, and we are conditioned souls. We have defects. We have limitations. So Prabhupada is encouraging that all energy be put in the Bhagavad Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma means Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Navavida Bhakti, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. And then from that Bhagavad Dharma, Varnashram Dharma can also follow. Of course, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that 50% of his mission remains the establishment of the Varnashram Dharma. But the basis of it is Bhagavad Dharma. So that's what I wanted to share today. Yeah. Yeah, glories of Bhagavad Dharma. Just end with one small story. Many of you may have heard this small story. Once upon a time, a person who was very educated, kind of a scholar, he came to meet Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He himself was a great scholar, and he thought only a scholar as Bhaktisiddhanta can clarify my doubts. So he was proud of his scholarship, etc., etc. So he came to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he said, I have a few questions. Can I ask you a few questions? And Bhaktisiddhanta, he could detect, the contamination in this person's heart. And he said, he deferred. He said, actually, there is I have a disciple, a brahmachari. Can you, take your questions to him? Can you ask him the questions? And he points to the brahmachari. So this gentleman, he goes to the brahmachari, and who is just about to worship the deities. And so he says that I have some questions. Your spiritual master sent me to you. Can you please answer those questions? And he said, yeah, I would love to answer your questions, but actually I'm just getting ready for some deity worship. So which can't be stopped. So let me, finish this deity service, and then, I can answer your questions. And meanwhile, as I'm doing some preparation services, if you want to, assist me, then that'll be nice. So he engages him, like in ISKCON, we engage devotees in pot washing. But here, this devotee engaged him in some menial service to the Lord. He asked him, can you, there's this, sandalwood and, block and a wooden block. Can you, make sandalwood paste? So he gave him some menial services. He engaged him in menial services, and he did that. And then after the deity worship, this gentleman, he came back, and then he asked him, okay, shoot, what are your questions? I'm here to answer them. And that person said, actually, all my questions have been answered. I had questions, but when you engaged me in the service, the questions were answered. So the word here also is shushusha. This Bhagavatam verse has the word shushusha, means service. The shushusha comes often in Bhagavatam. Often it's a refrain, not just hearing. Shushusha means actually serving. Shushusho Shaddadanasya Shanmahat Sevaya Vipra Vasudeva Katharuchi. Right, that verse comes 1 to 16. So the Shudra's service mode is glorified. So again, the point here is one would rather be a Shudra with that service mood to the Lord than be a puffed up Brahmana who is averse to the Lord. And if you read the Bhagavad Gita, all the Shudra qualities that are being described in Bhagavad Gita, they're all Vaishnava qualities. Humility, pridelessness, amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, kshantir, like that. Anyway, one last verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, right, I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra. I'm not a Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi, but I am a Gopi Bhartur, Padakamalayur, Dasadasanadas. I'm just a servant to the servant to the servant to the Lord. So that's our constitutional position. Swarupena Vyavasthitihi means liberation, means Swarupena Vyavasthitihi. That's what is being talked about here. And the other liberations they just go halfway. In fact, they are even snares of Maya. But this liberation of being situated in one's Swarupa, that is real liberation. Swarupena Vyavasthiti. So I'll pause there. It's 8 o'clock, 7:59. So thank you to Yashodanandan Prabhu. And anyways, I wanted to share one last thing, also very nice thing. So as I was preparing for the class, so last night I was looking for Srimad Bhagavatam class.com is a website I go often to. So there are lectures, verse by verse, on the Srimad Bhagavatam verses. So then I looked up 3633 and very sweet, lo and behold, whose lecture comes up. His Holiness Srila Prabhupada Maharaj lecture, my Guru Maharaj. And not only that, I think this was in 2010 November in Palatine. Maybe Maharaj was in our house or in Rati Prabhu's house in our community. And he spoke these verses. I said, wow. Anyway, so that's the parampara system. So we have no qualification to speak about this elevated subject of Srimad Bhagavatam, but by hearing in a descending manner from the Vaishnavas, we attain qualification to speak. So, any questions or comments? So you can read the verse 3633. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining from India and Nepal and elsewhere, US.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for a sweet class. This is Lakshmi Kandas.
Hare Krishna.
Regarding the Prabhupada establishing the, a vision of having the establishment of Varnashrama Dharma. But if we see whatever Prabhupada did, right, during his lifetime at the last 13 years or so, primarily try to make Brahmanas, right? Of course, that is what necessary. So, but then he said that remaining, my dream is 50% is not done. So, but still, from the ISKCON today also, Prabhu, right? I know there are bits and pieces are coming here and there, some communities, but we are still having the same process of, like second initiation. If I go that way, right? If that is what is the Brahmana is, so, but we are trying to trying to get everybody to that Brahminical stage, right? Though the devotees are engaged in various services based on their capabilities, or I think I'm just trying to understand how it moves as maybe say 50 years down the line or 100 years down the line. What would be the Prabhupada vision of, ISKCON's journey would be, right? Having this Daiva Varnashrama Dharma, right? So, if you can share some of your thoughts. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, this is quite an important topic in ISKCON nowadays. Well, let us understand things properly firstly, so that there are no misconceptions. Because this conversation, the statement that you made, the need of the hour is the Brahmanas. And so there's a conversation between, I think, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada or someone else. And so that doesn't mean, oh, everyone Brahmana. Prabhupada said, no. Not everyone will be Brahmanically oriented. The need of the hour is Brahmanas, but it doesn't mean that the 100% of the ISKCON organization or the Vaishnavas, they will do Brahminical functions or they will be Brahmanically qualified. It's not like that. So not artificially, Prabhupada again said, not artificially creating Brahmanas, but Brahmanas will be necessary because Brahmanas are the head of the society. And they will guide the society in general, and they will also guide our ISKCON society in general. So that's the first thing. Not that 3 years you're saying, how will it look? So it will not be like, so Prabhupada's goal is not that 100% of the ISKCON members, they will all be Brahmanas. That's not the point. The Varnashram system will be there. Some of the members of the Hare Krishna movement will be Brahmanas, and there will be others. But again, as Prabhupada mentioned here, Brahmana means one who has knowledge. You follow? So if you ask any of the so Prabhupada expected that all of the members of the ISKCON, they should have a philosophical understanding. They should know things as they are. You follow? They may not be shloka rajas and they may not be quoting scriptures and all that. But Prabhupada would say, are you reading my books? And that is not just for the Brahmanas. You would ask each and every person, even the one, like that. So Prabhupada expected the transcendental knowledge everybody has. So all of the members will know, the transcendental science of Krishna consciousness. And some of them will do Brahminical functions, some of them will do Kshatriya functions, some of them will do that. So it's natural, again, not artificially, like that. That's one. How will the future ISKCON will look? And then again, Varnashram system means, typically we have this idea, Varnashram means like, farm communities, just leave everything and go to the rural communities. Not necessarily. So the way the Varnashram system will look, it will be in urban settings like we are having. It will be in urban settings. Of course, maybe the urban, Prabhupada also envisioned that every urban center has a rural, a center associated with it. Like New York, Gita Nagari came as an extension of the New York Brooklyn Temple. Of course, like 4 hours away, but that's how Gita Nagari was envisioned. And so Prabhupada mentioned, and so simple living, high thinking. So some people would live in the farms, and then Prabhupada mentioned. So as far as cities are concerned, it's only for preaching. But anyway, so devotees might live in the cities, or they might travel to the cities and preach, or they might live in the rural environment. So again, so Varnashram system doesn't mean just the classical, Varnashram, but even in the cities, that Varnashram system is there. And it's sort of naturally there, even in our simple congregation of every temple you see, some devotees are Brahmanically inclined, they will do such services, some others are like that. For example, anyway, ISKCON Kishore Kishori, Jitendriya Prabhu, we were just glorifying him. I mean, like he's been there for 50, 60 years, 50 years almost. He came into Krishna consciousness in Chicago. And the whole temple, he maintains the whole temple. He knows each and everything, and he loves it, and devotees respect him. So that's a service. I mean, he's focused on that. So those are some thoughts. So it's not that everybody will become a Brahmana. The main thing, again, Prabhupada is mentioning is service mood should be cultivated. And on the Varnashram, on the spiritual platform, in one sense, everybody is equal. So there is no competition. There is no this sort of material hierarchy. Or Brahmana is superior. Kshatriya Vaishnava is less. Vaishya Vaishnava is less. The Vaishnavas are Vaishnavas. Vaishnava is never a Shudra or like that. Vaishnava is beyond these designations. So Prabhupada writes in this purport that to pursue these material designations at the cost of cultivating our spiritual designation, Jivera Surapoya Krishna Nityadas, that's a problem. So it's not a feather in the cap, actually. Again, Brahmanical initiation, because again, it came up. Prabhupada talks about this. Brahmanical initiation is not actually a feather in the cap. It's another feather in the cap. But the essence of Brahmanical initiation means coming closer to the mission of the spiritual master. That's the essence. And there are many misconceptions that, we need pujaris, so we need to initiate, or some people then they say the other way around. Well, I'm not interested. I don't have an inclination for deity worship. So is there a need for me to take Brahmana initiation? Why? So again, Brahmana initiation is not just for, cooking in the kitchen or worshipping the deity. Many Brahmanas, like, sannyasis, for example, they are Brahmanically initiated, of course. So their service is preaching. So Brahmanas, they perform 6 functions: yajan, yajan, patan, dana, pratikriha. But dana, pratikriha, for example, that everybody does, right? That's our bread and butter. ISKCON is the missionary movement. So that it is not as only the Brahmanas do. Everybody preaches, like we are going on book distribution. Everybody's preaching. People are doing presentations like that. So Prabhupada expected that every foot soldier within ISKCON knows basics of Krishna consciousness, fundamentals of Krishna consciousness. They are convinced about it, and they are qualified enough to even tell others. Does that help?
Yes, bro. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, we can end at 8:10. All right. Thank you all for joining. Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.